Hi there. I'm glad you're back. Today we're going to talk about things like supernatural stuff, ESPN, the knowing. Sometimes you have a knowing that you know something that you don't know why you know it, or you have no way to know it, but you do. Um, we're going to talk about some after death communications and those kinds of things. So let's get started. First, I'm going to tell you about my own experiences with knowings and after death communications. So I was engaged to be married in 1999. And 43 days before our wedding, my fiance died suddenly. And that day he had been out in the heat, and he had overheated and had a real bad reaction to the heat, and I wanted to come take him to the doctor, but his daddy was a doctor, and when you grow up and your dad's your doctor, you don't really like to go to doctors. So he didn't want to go, and we talked on the phone. He said, I'll talk to you later, and later never came. So the next day, I'm calling him. Well, let me back up. At 10 minutes to 1 that night, somebody knocked on my front door, and I sat up and said, Kim, because that was his name, and I thought maybe Kim was there. But I just knew that it was Kim knocking. That didn't make any sense because Kim had a key. So there was no reason for him to knock on the door when he already had a key to the place. So the next day I called him several times and there was no answer. And then I called and there was no answer. And then I left him this message. Well, I guess if you die, somebody will call and tell me. And so I called, tried to call again. And his roommate answered the phone about 6 o'clock that night. And I said, is Kim there? And he says, I think he's dead. I said, why do you think he's dead? And he says, well, because he hasn't moved since I left this morning. He's laying on the couch naked, and he hasn't moved all day, and he's cold. And I said, what have you done? He says, I didn't do anything. I found him that way. And I'm like, no. Have you called an ambulance? Have you called, for medical assistance? So somehow I knew that he was gone. Hey, Bonnie, it's good to see you, honey. And so there, in my life, there are just certain things that For example, I had a friend, Janet, who lived next door to me, and she started dating this guy that she was just crazy about. And he had 2 daughters about the same age of her one son. And so she's going out with this guy. And I met him one day in the driveway where, he was coming in as I was going out or something. And I met him, and he didn't have anything to say to me. And when I met him, I suddenly became afraid for Janet because I felt anger and abuse just wafting off of him. I just had this really kind of strange feeling because I felt like he was very abusive. And he, like I say, he had 2 girls, and so they were planning on getting married. And he didn't want her to hang out with me because I was fat. And he said, if you hang out with a fat person, that means it's okay. You think it's okay for you to be fat, which I thought was a little weird sounding, but whatever, I mean, if she wasn't allowed to hang out with me because I was chubby, well, guess what? She wasn't going to hang out with me then. But so she was telling me they were going to get married. And of course, I didn't get invited to the wedding. But I said to her one day, I said, make me one promise. And she says, what? And I said, the first time he hits you, you will leave. And she says, oh, why would you think that? And I said, I'm telling you, the man is abusive. His last wife left him with nothing but the clothes on her back and left 2 kids with him. And I said, those are not good signs. And I'm telling you, when I saw him, it wafted off of him that he was abusive. And I said, I know you don't have any reason to know that, but please, when he hits you the first time, you will leave. And she said, oh, that's not going to happen. So they got married. They came and moved all of her things out, and she just waved at me across the yard. And 2 weeks later, I get this phone call, and someone is sobbing into the phone. And they said, can I come over? And I didn't know who it was. They were crying so hard, I had no clue. And I said, well, who is this? And she said, Janet. And I said, well, sure, come on over. And of course, they had split up because it was, literally less than a month after they got married, because he had gotten abusive. And when she came in, and she had lost like 30 pounds in that month, I was shocked. And she was a nervous wreck. Her son was a nervous wreck. And he felt safe at my house. And so it was okay for him to be at my home, but that's where he felt safe. So there was no reason for me to know that that man was going to be abusive to her, but I did know. So there's lots of times that we know things. We just know we know them. And we don't have any reason. So sometimes we don't trust it. One time my mother and my dad were sitting at the kitchen table talking, and all of a sudden my mother grabs her head and she said, one of the kids has had a car wreck. And my daddy said, what? And she said, I just heard a car wreck sound in my head. And one of the kids has had a car wreck. Well, my brother and I were neither one at home. And so they were just kind of waiting. This was back in the, 80s, 70s, actually. They were kind of waiting. And then about 10 minutes later, this man calls. My daddy picks up the phone, and this man said, is this Mr. Fields? And my dad says, yeah. He says, well, first of all, let me tell you, your son's okay. He's not hurt, but he has had a car wreck, and he needs you to come get him. And, we just kind of laughed about it. Said, yep, Mama knows. There's certain things that kind of runs in our family. Certain things you just know. And so, when after Kim died, the next morning, I'm standing in the kitchen, and I look down the hallway, and I see his foot, like he's just walking in front of the doorway. And I'm stunned. I'm like, what? And I walked in the bedroom, and of course I knew he wasn't there, but I had seen him, and it was just really kind of strange. So, after he died, I was a mess. I was just a mess. And several months later, I was sitting in the chair crying and, wishing I could talk to him. And I just said out loud, I sure wish I could talk to you. I just wish you could just pick up the phone and call me. And about that time, the phone rang. I picked it up, and this man says, hey, Peggy, this is Bill Cox from out here at Rivergate Mazda. He said, we've got a sale going on, and I just want to know if you want to come out and test drive a new Mazda. I said, Mr. Cox, I'm on the do not call registry. How'd you get my number? He said, well, let me see. And he said, well, Kim gave it to me. Now, I knew two Kims. One was my sweetheart, and the other was my niece. I said, Kim who? He said, and I said, Sheck Snyder? He said, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Kim Sheck Snyder. I said, okay. I said, Mr. Cox, he's been dead for months. Why did you call me today? And he said, I don't know. He said, I just felt like I needed to call. And lo and behold, I got off the phone and I was laughing because I said, well, you couldn't call me, but you did the next best thing you could. You had somebody call me and say your name. So it was really kind of funny and just let me know that, he was still around. And so that's part of, after death communication. He would leave me dimes. I have a whole bowl of dimes that he would leave whenever I was doing something that he would have enjoyed or he would have approved of. He'll leave a dime. normally it's when I'm entertaining and when I'm having people over that he just would leave a dime just to let me know he's still there and still watching out for me. And then let's see. I want to tell you about a ghost story that one of my friends told. He experienced this when he was about 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12. They lived in a rural little town about 50 miles outside of Atlanta. And there was this big house on the square that this older woman lived in, elderly woman. And she was very reclusive. The house had been at one time a big stately home, but it had gone into quite a bit of disrepair and almost looked abandoned. She did have a gardener that would come around and cut her grass and, you know, pull the fruits off her trees. And she had pecan trees and, you know, nuts and, you know, everything. She had some pears and stuff like that in her yard. So her gardener would come and do her landscaping and mow her grass and get the fruit off the trees and keep it from, you know, being on the ground. And people thought she was very eccentric because she didn't go into town very often. She was rarely seen. When she was seen, she was a tiny little thing, and she was dressed a hat and, you know, really kind of covered up. It looked like the winter, even in the summer, she looked like she was, you know, cold, and she was very much covered up. So one day, um, they saw a hearse leave her house. So evidently she had passed in the home, and somebody had found her, and so they had a hearse leaving, and they're like, oh, she died. So the house sat empty for several months. And so you know how almost teenage boys, so they're all dare each other, and there was these tales going around. It was the 60s, and they decided that there was this tale that if you whispered a dead person's name, they would appear, and if you said it 3 times in the dark or something. So these boys decided to break into her home. So they go into this home, and it's just about getting dark. So they can barely see because it's pretty dark in there. And he said that there was not a lot of furniture. There was a couch, there was a kitchen table and 2 chairs, and then there was various things on the table, silverware and different kinds of things on the table, odds and ends. And so these boys, they had gotten them a little pack of cigarettes. They're 12 years old. They're going to smoke, and so they're all daring each other. Say her name 3 times. Say her name 3 times in the dark. Whisper her name, and we'll see if she appears. And they were trying to entice her ghost. And so they're smoking. They're talking about it. And then one of them got the courage to. He's like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. So he whispered her name 3 times really fast, and nothing happened. And so they're still sitting around her kitchen table and, looking around like, okay, well, nothing happened. So then they got, a little brave. Well, see, ain't nothing going to harm us. We're fine. And the next thing you know, an ice pick went flying across the room and stuck into the wall. My friend said, you ain't never seen 3 boys try to get out of there so fast. He said they look like the 3 Stooges pulling each other back. Like one would get ahead and the other would pull him back, and then he'd get ahead and somebody else would pull him back. And he said they never went in that house again because they were just really frightened of this haunted house. And so they made sure that all the neighbors knew that the house was haunted. So anyhow, so that's my ghost story for today. But I have a treat when I get up to 1,000 subscribers. I met a gentleman who's had been pronounced dead, and he went to heaven, and he came back, and his story is fascinating. I want to talk about, I want to talk, when I get 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to have him tell his story because when he told me, it was just amazing the things he had to say about what heaven's like and how it felt and seeing Jesus and all the kind of neat things that he experienced when he was there. So anyhow, when I get 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to do that. So please share, like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to meet you. Wednesdays are going to be supernatural days. We're going to talk about things that are supernatural and including ghost stories and all kinds. If you've got a ghost story, I'd love to hear it. I'm fine with retelling it. And if you want to chat, leave me a message. And thanks. Um, we'll talk to you later. I'll be seeing you on Saturday to talk about chasing dreams. And I'll tell you some stories about chasing my dreams, which are pretty funny. Anyhow, take care. Bye. Bye, Miss Bunny.